Who is this red beast? Much research has taken place regarding this red beast from the history of interpretation. It is the very thing that's described and seen by the prophet in the first verse of chapter 13. The beast who comes out from the sea. The Antichrist, the dragon, the beast and the false prophet, the second beast who appears from the land. This trinity, the satanic trinity. I will remind you that this has to do with the second person, the Antichrist, or the first beast who comes up from the sea. But is St. John referring to the Antichrist here? Yes. It has to do with the Antichrist, but not the historical one. The historical one will come once at the very end. But here, it is mainly the anti-Christian spirit of every epoch. And every adulterous Babylon sits on top of the anti-Christian, God-opposing spirit through the centuries. Historically, 1900 years ago, since John refers to Babylon, Rome, the prostitute is the Roman Imperium. The Roman Empire serves as the type of Antichrist and the God-opposing power. Thus, from a historical perspective, this description of the woman riding the beast refers to Rome, since Rome is intertwined with the anti-Christian spirit. However, it would be a mistake to limit this interpretation to Rome alone. St. Andrew, who lived in the 7th century, explains, Rome has forfeited this title long ago. Then what must we seek out in its place? Every leading city, every capital of a powerful empire which employs a God-fighting agenda and influence to the smaller nations. Today, as we know, we have the so-called superpowers. These are nations which keep the smaller nations in check, and they exert their influence on them, not only politically and culturally, but religiously, ideologically, and philosophically. I will use as a simple example the notorious European Economic Union. We said economic union. Economic union, of course. The objective of this union is to facilitate commerce and trade among the member nations. Yet this economic union is imposing and expecting the member nations to reform their domestic laws and public education system to the model of the leading nations of the union, and it is subtly imposing a shift of the entire society and culture. In the near future, they will pass a law to free up the homosexuals. Europe is full of them. And they will pass laws to grant amnesty to this lifestyle, and they will demand such laws from the other member nations. Consequently, the European Union is not simply an economic community. It promotes the economic element, yes, but its influence will not be limited to that area. It will extend to the various sectors of life. In due time, and this is essential to our very existence, they will impose upon us the change of our language. There are already rumors suggesting that the Greek language needs to be put aside so we can all speak one language, English. Those who imposed on us the monotonic system, the one-accent system, will impose on us the use of the Latin characters. After we switch to the Latin alphabet, then the English language will dominate and become the official language. Have we gone totally blind? Yes, we must be blind. Totally blinded by the economic promises of Europe. Don't we understand that this is not an economic partnership or association? The Agriculture Association of my neighborhood will simply regulate the prices of the goods, the prices of the products. It will not dictate and impose its standard of living in my home. However, when these unions and federations impose a certain standard of living in our homes, then there's something altogether different. So these great leaders of the superpowers exercise their orientation on the smaller nations, and then the kings of the smaller nations commit fornication with Babylon the great prostitute. How did they fornicate with her? They accepted all the bylaws and mandates and the standard of living which she imposes to the nations by her authority. This is frightful. And this beast is red to denote its bloody and murderous capabilities. St. Andrew says, the red color shows the brutality and the murderous tendency of the beast. Simply put, this leading world city center will finally revert to murderous military campaigns to impose its ideological orientation by force. So when these world superpowers, these world city centers, these Babylon Romes see that their ideological agenda cannot be fulfilled diplomatically, when their ideological self-interests are not voluntarily accepted, then they will respond militarily, they will kill. Hence the color of the red beast. And if you ask, what happened to the ideal of civil liberties and freedom? My friends, freedom and liberty have turned into a myth. What freedom? We are all talk about freedom, but the sad truth is that no one respects the freedom of the other person or nation. The global atrocity of our times especially lies in the fact that in the name of freedom we encroach and bound the dignity of the human person and the general freedom of mankind. In the name of freedom and Operation Freedoms, we encroach upon the freedom of others, an oxymoron. In any event, let's finally understand that outside of Christ, freedom is inexistent. Outside of Christ, freedom is a great illusion, a utopia, and a lost cause. Quite a nice myth, as I explained earlier. You may realize by now all these things that someone can pinpoint by looking at history from a theological perspective. And then he is left with one choice, especially during times of impetuous anti-Christian waves. His only choice is to stay very close to Jesus Christ. There is no other remedy for this, to stay very close to Jesus Christ and to reject all these new ideological imports and theories which now begin to circulate and will continue to circulate up until the point where the final person of the Antichrist comes. The key is to stay very close to Christ. This way, he will save himself and he will enter the new earth and the new heaven, where righteousness and holiness reigns according to Apostle Peter. This world will pass by, but we must await the new heavenly world where holiness and righteousness will reign forever. Amen.